meeting to order. Roll call, please.
That would be Supervisor McGordy.
Here.
Supervisor Crane, or Board Member Crane. Present. Board Member White.
Here.
Board Member Green.
Present.
Board Member Robinson is absent, and we are still waiting for a tribal confirmation seat.
Okay.
No, please go ahead.
I was just going to say, do you also want to record who else is present on the call?
Yes, I can do that. I think that can be, we can take that down in the minutes.
Okay, that sounds fine. So the next on the agenda item is Pledge of Allegiance. So Board Member Green, would you like to lead us?
Absolutely. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so consent items. So on the consent items, we have approval of the minutes from February 11th, 2021 meeting.
It's 1:30 on a Thursday.
And do we want to do these together, or should we do them separate?
Sorry.
No, go ahead. I was just trying to figure out where the minutes were posted, or had they not been posted yet?
So the minutes will be in the board packet agenda that you can download from the GSA website. I sent the link earlier a couple hours ago with the link to the website, and you can download the whole packet there. I can also scroll through the packet if people would prefer that.
I got it. Thanks, guys.
If I could just state, for the consent calendar, the items don't need to be heard separately, and they only require discussion if somebody has a concern or something like that that they want to bring up about one of the items.
Nicole, I just also like to note for the record that the board member Robinson has joined us.
Thank you.
So maybe what we ought to do is bring up the fact sheet, because I don't think most of us have seen this, including me. So
you're there. I can give you a brief presentation on that if you.
Yeah, that'd be great. Why don't you do that?
Yeah, so at direction from the board at the previous board meeting, there was direction to provide an FAQ sheet for publication on the website, and staff worked with Supervisor McGordy and created a sheet that shows that sort of explains and simplifies the SGMA process and answers some of the more pressing questions that Valley Basin members have, such as whether especially regarding the question of whether the wells will be metered, and also gives just a rough timeline of sort of when we can expect things in the implementation of SGMA over the next 20 years. This can be updated accordingly after we make some more decisions regarding how we're going to finance the GSA, among other things. But this also has contact information and just provides a sort of general understanding for the SGMA process and the GSA process in the Ukiah Valley Basin.
Well, thank you for that. I felt that this was necessary after going to several public meetings in Redwood Valley where this was brought up, and also on social media, and people thought that the next thing we were going to do was put meters and locks on their wells. So I wanted to assure them, first of all, that Redwood Valley really wasn't in the jurisdiction of our agency for the most part, and second of all, that's not what we intend to do at all. So now we have something that we can share with people, and thank you, Andrew, for taking care of this. So okay, so if we go back to our item on the agenda, so I would entertain a motion for accepting the consent items.
Real quick, we just need to make sure there's no public comment to this item.
So, base rate is $10 for the first hour, and $250 for each additional hour.
Do I hear a motion? Or do you?
I think Beth has a comment.
I have a public comment, Glenn.
Okay.
You know, I checked that for the packet yesterday on the website and it was not yet posted. So I only received this FAQ sheet like 15 minutes ago. And I'm wondering if any of the other board members had an opportunity to read through it. I'm the chair of the TAC. I have not had an opportunity. I just wanted to put my mind at rest that someone else has.
You know, I haven't really read through it thoroughly either. Maybe we should defer on that and just move that to the next meeting.
I'd like to make a comment if I could.
Sure,
This
go
is
ahead.
Al. I think it's difficult to attend these meetings without having had a chance to review the stuff that's going to be presented. I've been looking for this packet. Finally found it, like Beth said, just a half hour ago. I would think it would be really helpful if when these things are posted, that at least anyone that's a member of this board and any other people that are interested these things should come in an email so that you know that they're there and you can review them. It's frustrating to not have had a chance to review something and then be expected to discuss it.
I wholeheartedly agree with that.
Yeah, we're probably cutting it way too close on this, Andrew, just for the record. So, you know, if you want, what I suggest maybe we do is pull the fact sheet from the consent calendar and defer until the next meeting. Even the minutes, we really haven't had a chance to review those properly. I'm not sure what to do. I guess we could pull that as well and defer until next meeting, and then work to get these out at least 4 or 5 days in advance so that we have a chance to read this.
Absolutely. And we had there was some discussion on the presentation that will be presented later by Larry Walker and Associates, and that came late. So that's I should have posted the packet earlier, but we'll make that noted for the next meeting.
Is that acceptable to everybody?
I think it's okay posting it, but I think it's even more important to distribute it so that you don't having to keep going to the website and see if it's up yet.
Yeah, I'm getting so used to, as a supervisor, to always be chasing after things that it's routine for me to go to websites to look for things because often I miss them in the emails. But I agree with you that we want to be sure. I mean, that's one of the promises that we made when we formed this agency, that we would be really good about keeping the public informed and have a really robust, you know, and transparent process. So at the moment, we're not living up to that. So we'll have to work on that. That's about all I can say. So Andrew, for the record, make a note that we're going to be sure that we have our packet put together at least, 5 days ahead of the meeting, and so that there's adequate time for our board members and interested persons to be able to review the content of the meeting.
I think that we can commit to, the problem is sometimes we're waiting for last minute items, but I think that we could commit to posting what we have, even if we're waiting for a last minute item. And so at least the board can read everything that we have when we have it.
I would agree to that. So Board Member Crane, you had your hand up.
I think that the point made about being noticed, setting up, having a will serve list so that when they're published, not the document pushed, but notice of them having been published to anybody who wants to sign up for that, and certainly all the members of the respective staffs and the body.
Okay. All right. So for for future meetings, let's make that a policy. I don't think we need to vote on that. That's just something that should be standard operating procedure so that we're all well informed. We've all agreed that's what we're going to do.
I make a suggestion that we make it official at the next meeting. So it is an obligation that the body would have to disband rather than it being informal.
If I may, I recorded this in the minutes as general consensus of the board giving direction to staff to make all available meeting packet materials published at the time of agenda. Does that sound correct?
And then also notice to all members via email.
Okay.
Beth, I know you had your hand up for a while. Go ahead and speak, and then I'll speak after you, if you don't mind. Going through the chair, of course. Glenn, is that okay?
Yes, that's fine.
Oh, thank you. I was just thumbing up what was being said. Like I agreed. I would just say all interested parties rather than members, because I think the TAC and any public members who have requested agenda material distributions for the Brown Act should also receive that notice. Thank you.
And my comment about the email was that I first received an email a few days ago, and I'm not sure if that was automatic because an agenda was posted. And then I got one this morning at 10:59 a.m. Was that because the agenda packet was finally uploaded? Was that an automatic trigger, or is that something that Andrew is manually sending out? I had a question about the email notifications.
That's me sending them out. So I sent out the agenda packet when it was posted on Friday, I believe.
So it's not an automatic trigger per se. You have to put up the agenda and then send out an email. Is that correct? Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, we're sorry for the inconvenience here, and we'll strive to do better. We want to strive. We will do better in the future and make sure that we're that all of our board members and interested parties have the information available to them and have a chance to go over it and read it. Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. Moving on to the next action.
Sorry, hold on 1 second. We do need an action to continue this agenda item.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion to continue this agenda item until next meeting.
So moved. This is Al.
Crane, second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to continue the agenda items under consent, 3A and 3B, until the next meeting. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Okay, under 4 action items, A, discussion and possible appointment of tribal stakeholder director. And this is continued from February 11th. Has there been any developments on this?
Yes, the Redwood Valley Rancheria. This is Andrew Bake, Mendocino County Water Agency. The Redwood Valley Rancheria has nominated tribal members Eddie Navarez to be the GSA tribal representative, and we have circulated, and that letter was circulated to the tribes within the Ukiah Valley Basin. We are currently waiting for confirmation that they second Mr. Navarez's nomination, and so this item will have to be continued until the April meeting.
Okay. All right, well then I guess we'll just move on to the next item. Do we make a formal motion to continue this? Is that the correct procedure?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we continue this item until the next meeting.
Second, Crane.
Okay, I will give them a call and tell them.
I'm sorry, I should have said I will entertain a motion.
Motion by Crane.
Okay.
Second by Mr. Green.
Okay, there's a motion has been made to continue this item until the next meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed? The motion carries. Okay, Item B, presentation and discussion regarding introduction to groundwater sustainability funding for the Ukiah Valley Basin GSA. We'll receive a presentation from SCI Consulting regarding potential funding mechanisms to pay for GSP implementation.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Bliss, and I'm with SCI Consulting. A couple of quick housekeeping. Laura, do you want to give an introduction, or should I just dive right in?
Go for it, John. I think it's fine. You can do it.
And then the next question, Andrew. Okay, fantastic. That's answered the question. So you can see the presentation. So Chair McCordy, members of the board of directors and staff and others, as I said, my name's John Bliss. I work for a small company over in Solano County called SCI Consulting. And we help public agencies up and down the state with issues of revenue. We have a small role in your GSP, and we have kind of a financing tech memo, which will be almost a chapter within your GSP. And today there's no action required. This is informational, and I just kind of want to give everyone a little background on what to think about in terms of funding of the implementation. And so this is something you'll be seeing more of me over the next 10 months and possibly beyond. And I'm here today just to give you a background, a 101, a primer, and then we can answer any questions, and then I can do an additional research, whatever would be most helpful to it. So Andrew, why don't you go ahead and go to the next slide? Great. In fact, you go back, actually just stay right there, just so everyone knows. We work with a number of GSAs. We're working down in Sonoma County, and we've got a nice survey that we're going to share the results of that will be helpful to you. We're up in Siskiyou County. And then in your area, we work with the Ukiah Valley Fire Protection District. They're one of our longtime clients, as is Hopland and Redwood Valley, Capella. So we know a little bit about your area, but a lot of it is research-based. Essentially, as I was saying, there's a requirement, a Sigma requirement that the GSP has to have some discussion, some kind of overview of what's going on in terms of the funding. And so we're trying to satisfy that. We also, but the bigger picture really is we want to create a locally viable and right-sized funding strategy. And I appreciated the earlier comments about the fear in the basin of locking and metering wells. We get that bit, we understand that, we see that in other areas. And so how we talk about this and how we think about this is prickly and fragile. And so we want to make sure we think about it and come up with a strategy and a path forward that works for you guys. And so there's two kind of steps. One of them is to evaluate and quantify the costs, and we're starting that, and we're going to go over just kind of our preliminary numbers with you today, and then I'm going to talk about a couple of funding options. Again, this is just the real beginning of a process, and we basically have pretty good news for you. So Andrew, why don't you go ahead and slide down to the next slide? So this is operations and maintenance. So we worked with LWA, and we twisted their arm a little bit and asked them to kind of look ahead and see what kind of recommendations that are going to be in the GSP. And we tried to bracket it. So we evaluated 5 costs that we'll call operations and maintenance, and then we came up with a high range and a low range. And so the first one is operating the GSA itself, the websites, preparing the agendas, the packets, all of that kind of stuff. We put a range of $10,000 to $25,000 a year for that. We do think there'll be grant writing in some years, but not every year. So we went 0 to 15 on that. And then again, this is just real basic in terms of monitoring water level. We broke out water level and water quality. We know there's some stream flow gauges and some other things, but really we bracketed each of those between $25,000 and $50,000 a year, or another way to look at it is $50,000 to $100,000 a year. Laura can talk a little bit about that today if you want, but really we'll be refining those costs. The 5th line you'll see is what we call the mediation fund. There's a chance that LWA in their recommendations in the plan will have the development of some sort of fund where local well owners may be able to get some assistance with some remediation to their wells or facilities that may help the management of the groundwater. So kind of operation and maintenance, we're looking, just shooting from the hip, 60 to 140. That's our range. So let's go ahead to the next one. We'll look a little bit at capital projects. Capital projects, at this point, what we're seeing is that if there are some large capital projects that are recommended, that they would be grant funded entirely. Now, there is a chance that there's a local contribution. Lots of times the state ultimately will want some sort of local contribution, something they may look at in the future. But at this point, we didn't put any money in for that. So let's go ahead with the next slide, which is just kind of a summary. And what we're at here is if you do the operation and maintenance and the capital projects, we're between 60 and 140. Now that's very, very good news, because those costs, even for an area your size, those costs are manageable. They're not, we had a fear early on that we would be looking at $250, $500, $1 million a year, and that's totally different than what we have. These costs are reasonable for your area. So that's ultimately the good news, that we are in the right range. So let's slide down, and I want to kind of spend a couple of minutes on different funding mechanisms. And we called the first three the best options. And I always get a chuckle or a long face when I talk about the first option, but it is the best option, and that is using existing revenue sources. And the reason I get a funny look is because most public agencies in California don't have any additional funds anywhere. However, the scale of the need for additional revenue is quite small. And I understand there's 4 agencies as part of this. If each agency kicked in 25 grand a year, that gets close. And it avoids the political, the costs, all of the different burdens that go along with coming up with some funding mechanism. So we always leave no stone unturned when we're looking for existing revenue sources that may already exist. The second one, of course, grants and loans. You all are sophisticated in terms of those. They're competitive. They will be getting more competitive. They're free money, so they're great when you can get them. And so we always want to look there also. The third one is, and you're going to hear the vocabulary that I tend to use and that people use in our field, which you'll hear me throw around: fees, taxes, and assessments. Those three, and you should think of them as a Chevy, a Ford, and I guess it's a Chrysler. They are all ways of collecting money, but they each have their own idiosyncrasies, and there's overlap, and the laws are unclear. A fee generally means that you get something specific in return. And so a regulatory fee is a type of fee which is keyed very closely to something. A plan check, an inspection, those types of things you can pay a fee. Regulatory fees are easy to set up, they're inexpensive to set up, they're relatively easy to collect, and they can be a part of your revenue. So regulatory fees will not pay for all of your implementation costs, but we should look very, very aggressively at what they will pay and see if we can collect those as regulatory fees. Usually when you set up a regulatory fee, you hire a consultant, they do a study that justifies that particular fee. They usually will require legal review, because the definition of what can fall into a regulatory fee is fairly tight, and you want to be conservative on it, because most revenue sources in California require some sort of hearing or balloting, something like that. A regulatory fee does not, but it's limited in its use. And so the portfolio of existing revenue sources, grants, loans, regulatory fees are the way to go in terms of this. However, we have developed some models that are, I'm going to go over, if you will entertain me, that if the revenue needs are greater than the existing, if the revenue demands necessitate it, and if the three that we have circled, that Andrew circled in green, if those three are not sufficient, there's a couple of alternatives that you can look at. And as you all know, the Sigma is new. And so there's not a defined easy path forward. We are involved in a lot of them up and down the state, and we're certainly in touch and watching different efforts, and we will share what we learn with you. But there isn't an answer key yet to do this. There are two major types of revenue sources I want to talk to you about today. Neither of them will you jump up and down with joy and think this is great. Both of them have a negative aspect. Both of them are political in nature and require political political support of different types. The first one is something called a property-related fee, and property-related fees are quite common in California, but we don't use the vocabulary property-related fee very often. Your water fee is legally a property-related fee. Your sewer fee, your garbage fee are all property-related fees. The revenue from a property-related fee has to be related to a particular property. So the way Sigma was written, they believed that this would be the common way to collect revenue. It does not require a balloting, but it does require a very visible, transparent public hearing. And the revenue is distributed, in this case, to the well owners. And so the earlier comment, locked and metered, that's what this is. This would be likely with your rate, your revenue needs are so little, we wouldn't probably meter, we'd probably do a flat rate, something like that. But it is the property-related fee distributes the revenue needs to the well owners. Good and bad, mostly bad. The second one, which is not particularly popular either, but maybe more viable, and in fact, we think it's a lot more viable in Sonoma County, and it's probably something we'll recommend more strongly, is a traditional special tax. And folks are probably familiar with those. We vote on them probably too often at regular March or June or November ballots. It requires 2/3 of the registered voters. With this model, and this wasn't what the drafters of Sigma thought, this model is you distribute the costs broadly throughout the whole basin. So every property owner would get, every registered voter would get to vote, and then every property owner would pay. Now, when you distribute it amongst all the parcels, as you can imagine, the rate per parcel is very, very low. And I'll show that in a model. We modeled this for you. But you have to have broad appeal. And so one of the things we're doing in Sonoma County is trying to develop that messaging and try to understand what property owners and well owners are responding to. And we're starting to understand what is appealing about a typical homeowner in Ukiah. Why would they vote yes to tax themselves, albeit a very small amount, for groundwater sustainability? And we're getting some reasonably good feedback on that. And so there is generally the interest in water and sustainability is strong enough that we think there's some viability. So let's go ahead, Andrew, and why don't you go to the next slide, and we're going to show the model. So this is, and I hate lots of tables on this, so if you can just bear with me, we're going to move from the left-hand side of the table towards the right. And so in this particular case, we took a list of the types of wells. Now, this is not completely up to date. Amir gave me this list 6 months ago. The details are not important. It's just kind of the general idea. And so we had 117 ag wells, 11 industrial wells, and then 70 municipal wells, and about 1,000 domestic wells and 1,000 other. And this is just a model just to show you the sense of scale. So if we put $300 a year on every ag well, $300 on every industrial well, and $300 on every municipal well, we actually generate the 60,000, the low range. Now, if we also modeled it, if we said, hey, we need closer to the 140, we put $500 a year on each ag, industrial, municipal well, and we hit each domestic well for $25 a year, a relatively low burden. I know there's a principled gut reaction against this. We get that, and that's something that we'll have to manage. But this is a model that is maybe less painful than I think a lot of us thought a year or 2 or 3 years ago when all of this started. So Andrew, why don't you go ahead and go to the next model page, which is the special tax. Again, lots on this table, and so just bear with me. We'll move from the left to the right. Essentially, we broke the different we took the boundary of the basin, and we were able to intersect all those with a parcel map that we have and find out all the different types of parcels. That's essentially the business we're in. And so we've got it broken into about 10 different property uses, and this is based on the county assessor records. The good news here is there's a little less than 7,000 single family homes, most of which of course are incorporated Ukiah. And we see that in that first column. The next column to look at is the fourth one over where it says acres. For ag, we've got almost 17,000 ag acres, and then timber and pasture, we've got another 3,200. So if we distributed that broadly to these properties, so this would require the 2/3 vote, but we get everyone involved. We message everyone that, hey, let's pull together, let's invest in the future, let's protect our way of life. Would you be willing to contribute this much to make sure that our groundwater is managed in a sustainable way? You know, we put $4 a year, which is very, very low, on every single family house, and then some of the other commercial industrial type. And we put $1 a year on each ag acre and timber acre, and that got us to 60,000. If we went $10 a year on every house and every parcel, essentially non-ag parcel, and $2 a year per acre, that gets us to the 140. And so again, we understand the sensitivity of this. It is very, very real, but I wanted to at least plant the seeds in the board members' minds today that there is if you have to go down this route, the lift isn't as bad as we may have thought. We understand there's a big political pushback to this, but we wanted to show a sense of scale actually here today. So Andrew, go ahead. I think I have just one more slide. Yeah, this is really my last slide, and kind of what are the next steps, what we'll be doing. You'll be seeing more of me over the next 8 to 10 months. And as I said, my firm's a subcontractor to LWA, so we'll work with them to refine those costs and make sure that we have costs that are viable and reasonable this year, and we'll look out 5, 10, 15, 20 years, that type of thing. So to get those costs a little bit stronger. We'll talk about different funding strategies. We'll be interacting and presenting to you all and getting guidance from you as to what you'd like us to explore and what seems the most viable. And then at some point, at probably late this year or early next year at your direction, if there is a path forward that requires some engagement of the overall community or the community of well owners, something like that, that would happen. And then the two funding mechanisms I mentioned, the property related fee and the special tax, have very specific administrative requirements and schedules that you have to go through. If and hopefully this is the case, that there's an existing funding source or some grant comes available, or definitely I'm going to strongly recommend every regulatory fee can be collected, is collected. Hopefully that portfolio will work, but if not, there's other possibilities. So I think my next slide is just the questions and discussions. And so I would love to start kind of this relationship with you all, and I can answer any questions today. I can take guidance from you, and all of that. So with that, I'll stop talking and listen.
Okay, well, thank you, John. I'm going to try to change my view here so I can see everybody. So I just make a comment that right now, we do have a line item in the Mendocino County budget for the groundwater agency of $300,000. I'm trying to get some information on what's expected out of that, what's our anticipated expenses. Amber, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the budget numbers and see what's been allocated by the county and anticipating expenses or where it stands.
This is Amber Fissette, Water Agency. I haven't, are you talking about in the water agency budget?
Yes. Mendocino County has a line item allocated for water agency, which I talked to Darcy Antle this morning. She couldn't give me a lot of information other than to say that there's $300,000 as a line item. And beyond that, she didn't have any detail.
Let me pull up the budget as you continue your discussion, and hopefully I can have an answer for you in a minute.
And if I might call on Board Member Crane, and he was recollecting when the agency was initially being formed and what the commitment was from the group. Can you kind of reiterate that for everyone?
It's my recollection that during the formation period, there was a member of the greater community who was very vocal that everyone should have the ability to have their voice heard. Those that had votes would be paying voluntarily. So there was, the membership didn't have any obligation to fund the function. And that was argued, discussed, and the formation left that concept behind so that each of the city, the county, and I believe the public water agencies also agreed that they would have obligation, and that's incorporated in the governing documents of this body. That's my recollection. Mr. White, do you have any recollection, additional information, Alfred?
No, I really can't add anything to this. I know that we kicked in money, and that's the best I can remember. Sorry.
Yeah, anyway, it's my recollection that the Corps, with the exception of the tribal seat, have an obligation to fund purveyors of water, that is. And then the other piece of the puzzle is to express an opinion that it seems to me that whatever funding mechanism is evolved, that it be respective of how much water goes through, is used by, in other words, the benefit, the cost should be related to the benefit.
So in other words, if the amount of money you're assessed is proportional to the amount of water that you use.
At first blush, that seems to me to be the preferred method. There may be reasons why that's not as practical, but and then the other piece is, for instance, in the case of the city of Ukiah, the city has its own water system, and some of that water comes from the ground and some of it comes from the river. Yet the city is paying a significant portion of the total being collected currently. And I want to be paying attention to are the charges equitable?
So my initial reaction is that, of course, agriculture uses a lot of water out of the wells, but they don't really have a recharge capability money-wise, the way that a water company or another municipal organization would. So, that kind of also affects their ability to pay. So you know, I think what's important here, we should go back and revisit through our minutes. I have Andrew research what the original discussion on funding the organization was, whether that was meant to be just a temporary startup funds or whether we thought that would be more of a long-term commitment. Those are two questions that I have. And I think that would be a good place to start. Obviously, it costs to run these, so we can't expect it to be for free. But if we have allocations that work from, you know, I'm thinking of property tax, which a lot of people pay in Mendocino County and the city of Ukiah. If we're able to fund it through the general fund, that's also a possibility since these are not huge fees. And at the moment, we do have an allocation, a line item specifically for the Mendocino County Water Agency, which this falls under, I believe, which is probably something else that we should clarify how it's going to stand as kind of its cost allocation into the future. And it'd be a good idea to get some clarification on that.
On the property tax point, in the city, property tax largely goes to the county, as well as the property tax in the county. So the property tax collected in the city by the city or for the city is quite small.
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't want to lose track of where those dollars go and if it winds up being creating an inequity.
Mm-hmm. No, I understand. So I guess the point I'm going at with this is that I don't want to create a burden for anybody or perceived burden or inequity, and that's why I'm glad that we're working with John to find a way that we can see as an equitable solution. And there certainly is a point to a good point that people who use a lot of the resource should be proportionally paying for it. But I just worry a little bit about how that might transfer to the ag community, which their cash flow doesn't look anything like a water company's when it comes to how that water is used. And they're also in the position that, well, we'll just leave it at that. So I think this is a good place to start our discussion. Any other points or comments right now?
If long term, the city water customers are currently subsidizing the city's sewer users, sewer system users, and the sewer district's users by virtue of the reclaimed water system, which is going in large part to ag and essentially free of charge. At some point, there needs to be a method of monetizing that water.
Mm-hmm.
The system's largely been put in place with grant, but that doesn't take care of its operation and maintenance. So over time, that's going to be a factor in equity in terms of overall water use, water availability.
Good point. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Again, it's a resource that's being utilized, and there are expenses associated with it. So there's kind of two ways of looking at this. We don't want to overcharge anybody, but by the same token, we got to be real about operating the system, and the projected costs of this are pretty reasonable. So it's good that we're starting the discussion now so that we can start getting feedback and ideas. Any other board members want to weigh in at this time?
I'll just make the point that one of the ways to relieve some of the pressure on this question is to keep the costs that we incur by the programs that we develop at the absolute minimum that we can.
And I think that to this point, it's been pretty amazing where we've gotten, primarily through grants. So we're following that track, and I think it's a good one to use as a kind of a standard operating procedure for this organization. Any other comments at this time from board members?
I have an observation. We've, I don't know, we've kind of been like at the Whole Foods salad bar, putting a few things on the plate here and there.
Mm-hmm.
Some monitoring wells, some surface monitoring stations. We've added some groundwater chemistry constituents to our plan. And even though some of these wells and some of these stations, the upfront capital costs have been paid, we're on the hook now for the monitoring, replacing equipment, that type of stuff. To Al's point, we got to make sure we stay frugal through this whole process. We've been charged with proving a negative here, proving that we don't have any problems in our aquifer. And it's a challenging task to do that. We got to make sure we're not committing to large ongoing expenditures year after year. And that's immediately in our control. John, your presentation is not only well-timed, but perhaps 6 months too late. But we're glad to get it now.
Yeah. Okay, any other board members want to weigh in before we go to comments from the general public? Okay, Devin?
So good afternoon, Devin Jones, Mendocino County Farm Bureau. Just a couple of questions, and one really has to do with timing, and the other has to do with looking at the bigger picture of several other water issues that are concurrently happening in this basin that are going to require monetary funding for. So that may or may not have been brought to the attention of the consultant in this conversation. But in terms of looking at initiative types of approaches, you know, looking at the timing for a 22 ballot isn't that far out. And there are other efforts afoot looking at, you know, potentially where we may be going for looking at funding mechanisms for example, the Potter Valley project. And a lot of the same constituency is going to be looking at funding, you know, several of these projects concurrently. So that's something that needs to be very cognizant and everybody needs to be aware of. Second of all, I think the other thing that I heard was looking at, you know, kind of a parcel-based or acre-based assessment versus a water use assessment. And I don't know if we've seen a full picture of what would be required for either or. In terms of if you are going to be looking at a water use mandate, that's going to require metering on everybody's wells and other measurement infrastructure in order to really justify what those costs are going to be to assess a fee on water use. And without seeing additional information, I'm not going to speak for my constituency, but I know there would be a concern with what additional costs would be involved in some of these mechanisms. So just want to keep that in mind, where somebody who may not be fully, informed about what's been going on in this basin and the timeframes for some of these projects coming up together needs to be considered.
Thank you, Devin. That is a real concern, because I just doing kind of a thumbnail sketch. If my numbers are right, 66,000 acre feet run through the Potter Valley project, and it costs about $12 million a year to operate that by PG&E at the moment. So do the math. It's about $200 an acre foot to cover the costs of that water going through there. Recognizing that there is some revenue that comes in from the electricity, but it shows you that we're the days of cheap water along the Russian River Basin is probably not long for the world. We don't know how that's going to turn out, but that's just something for us to be aware of. And I agree with Devin, is that if everything hits all at once, there will be a lot of overwhelmed people. Any questions or comments?
Chairman
John, Amber?
If I may, I don't see, I've been searching through the budget and I don't, the water agency, it only receives a pretty small allocation every year from general fund that goes to other costs. And so I don't see the allocation that you're talking about.
Okay, we'll have to get that clarified from Darcy Antle. And
yeah, I may have to do that and come back at the next meeting with more information on that.
okay, so I think we can give you some direction to do that so that we have all the numbers in front of us so we know what our resources are going into this, along with the information about how we initially funded this project, and try to figure out from the minutes if we thought that was a one-time occurrence or something that we would be paying on a regular basis. So, all right. Anything else before we move on to the next agenda item? Okay, if not, thank you very much, John, for your presentation, and it gives us a lot to think about, and we'll move on to the next item.
Thank you.
Okay, Andrew, if you'd bring us back up to the agenda. Okay.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
All right, so I guess we're going to item B, presentation. No, we've done that. So item C is presentation and discussion regarding the watershed coordinator position by the California Land Stewardship Institute. The board will receive a presentation on the newly awarded grant for a watershed coordinator position to the California Land Stewardship Institute. The coordinator will work with the GSA on groundwater recharge locations, as well as conducting outreach water to disadvantaged communities. Okay, so who is presenting on this?
That's me.
There you are, Laurel.
Laurel.
Couldn't see you.
It's okay. So are you going to run the slides for me, Andrew? Is that what goes on here? Okay, there we go.
Yeah, that'll probably be easiest.
Okay. All right. So as many of you know, my nonprofit, the California Land Stewardship Institute, or easier to say, CLSI, applied for a grant from the California Department of Conservation under a program for sustainable groundwater management watershed coordinators. They received 26 grant applications requesting 7.5 million, and they only had 1.5 million, and they approved 5 grants. And Ukiah Valley Groundwater Basin was one of those, and in fact is the only one in the coastal mountains. Everything else is in the Central Valley. We received support letters from the Ukiah Valley Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency, all of you, County of Mendocino Board of Supervisors, City of Ukiah, Mendocino County Inland Water Power Commission, Russian River Flood Control and Water Conservation Improvement District, Larry Walker Associates, Mendocino County Farm Bureau, and about 18 different farms in the basin. I think one of the reasons we were able to get this grant is because we had all of the support. So we thank all of you for that. The grant is for a little over $272,000 over a 3-year period, with a match of about $94,000 that's provided by us and a contract with Larry Walker and Associates for gauging. There we go. Okay. Something to understand about these grants is they are for coordination, monitoring, community outreach, but they aren't for actually building things or implementing projects. So we can write grant proposals, we can do different things, but we can't actually go out and put trees in the ground. So it's kind of an unusual type of grant. So what I listed here are the different goals from the work plan. When I prepared this plan, I talked to a number of different people, and of course it has to fit within what the grant will allow. So one of the things is to coordinate with your agency some workshops or virtual meetings in order to get more public input into the plan. And part of this will be doing outreach to disadvantaged communities through bilingual radio and local TV announcements, newspapers. We hope to work with the new tribal representative and then through various organizations to agricultural, rural, and city residents. This is supposed to happen between May and December. Okay. Then the next goal is to fill data gaps. So this is a combination of the funding that we've received and from this new grant and from Larry Walker and Associates. So that would be installing 2 new stream flow gauges. And with this additional money, we think we can do up to 3 or 4. So this is going to make it easier to get a bigger network in. We're going to maintain all the stream flow and well gauges we currently have, plus these new ones and some new well gauges. And you can see all the different things you have to do to maintain them. I'm not sure how much you've heard about how stream flow is done, but it takes a lot of time to maintain a stream flow gauge. Well gauges are much easier. You know, we've got both of them in there. Once you download the data, you then have to do a bunch of work on it to make sure that it's correct and reliable. So this will happen throughout the grant. Okay, next one. So then there is a portion of this grant that results in a watershed planning effort. So for this one, this section is very relevant to the GSA. This is trying to define locations for groundwater recharge projects, tributary re-veg projects, which have, you know, the effect of increasing riparian shading, reducing stream temperatures, and providing some stream bank erosion control. And then also fire fuel load reduction projects. So the way we'll do this is we'll do kind of a real general look that we'll use GIS for to define, you know, what's good places for this. And I'm on the technical advisory committee, and we've already sort of started to do this with the recharge project. So this will be an opportunity to kind of assist with that. Then we have to, you know, kind of call landowners, see if they would be willing to sponsor such a project. Then we'll go out and actually do detailed analysis at each site. And then we'll review those sort of draft projects or preliminary projects with the group of agencies. Then once we've decided, you know, what should really go in the plan, we will do detailed designs and budgets for 15 projects. So this could help you with some of your future funding and grant writing and that kind of thing. Then we write up that section of the plan and that gets reviewed and we finalize it. Okay, next one. Okay, this is kind of a similar task, but we're going to specifically look at agricultural lands. In this instance, we'd work with the Farm Bureau, cattlemen's, and wool growers because we want to get more people to do farm water quality plans. And so this would use the fish-friendly farming, fish-friendly ranching program, which is already in existence. And we would, through that program, identify sites that have high priority projects where it's really beyond the landowner's ability to implement them. So not just a simple BMP like plant some more cover crops, more like let's set back the bank of your creek and revegetate it or something like that. We would also work with private owners to install up to 20 soil moisture metering systems. We have some matching funds from DWR for this. And this is a water conservation practice that can reduce irrigation water need by about 20%. Then we would, again, draft another section of the watershed plan and work with the agricultural groups, and then bring that section to the GSA, Mendocino County, and other groups. Okay, move down a little bit. So that would be that section. Then we have a final section that deals with urban lands. So we're going to need some help getting a lot of contacts in the urban areas, but we're going to work on that to kind of define some types and locations of urban water quality projects. Now, these would be things that, you know, help to filter out pollutants. So bioswales, vegetative filters, rain gardens, porous pavement. And to the extent that we can try to do some recharge in urban areas to mitigate impervious surfaces, we will try to do that too. We'll also hold some workshops for urban rural residents. We've done this for years on water conservation, reducing pesticide and fertilizer runoff. And sometimes we can even touch on reducing septic system problems. Again, we will have a section of a plan that will be reviewed by everybody. Then the final action will basically be to put all of those sections together and have one final section that everybody has read. Now I'd like to introduce Barry Hill. Barry, are you on here? There you are. He is our hydrologist, and he will serve as the watershed coordinator with some assistance from me and our GIS specialist, Brandon. So this is a short version of Barry's resume. He has worked for many years in both California and Hawaii, and he is just the right person, I think, for these kinds of tasks, because he has a very good understanding of the hydrology of the Russian River, as well as the geology, sediment transport, water quality, groundwater to surface water interactions, channel morphology, all the things you kind of need to know to do this type of work. And so this is just his, list of different places that he's worked, including the USGS, the Forest Service, and a number of other spots. And Barry, maybe you can chime in now.
Yeah, hello everybody. Yeah, like Laurel said, we're looking forward to working on this project. We've already started working with Larry Walker Associates, getting some of the gauges going. We've been doing some gauging in the Russian River watershed for a number of years for the frost diversion program. So we're going to build on that and be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Yeah, I think there's one more slide, maybe. I don't know. No, okay. We don't have a contract for this work yet, but they're supposed to get it to us in April. So that should fit in with the getting, the plan done in January. So there will at least be some of this work that can assist with that. So yeah, maybe any questions the board might have?
Laurel, this is Glenn. So first of all, I think your plan is represents a really good value. If you do all the things that are listed here, you're going to be very busy.
Yep.
And just another comment that have you reached out also to the Mendocino wine growers, seeing as how they represent a pretty good amount of the acreage and
yeah, we will include them. Yeah.
Of course, yeah, because between Farm Bureau and Mendocino wine growers, that's about 90% of people who are actively farming in the valley. So.
Yeah. I just didn't type them in there, but I work with them all the time. Yeah.
And Barry, you have an impressive CV here, and it looks like you've been around the block in terms of different situations and things that you've cooperated with. As you look at this project, what's striking to you about working in Ukiah Valley compared to other places?
Sorry. Well, I think one of the aspects of the Russian River in the Ukiah Valley that's really interesting to me, that it has both some similarities and some contrasts to places I've worked before, is the interactions between the channel geomorphology and the processes that are going on in the river and the tributaries and the groundwater. And so that's something that Laurel and I have talked about. And I know that Larry Walker and Associates are considering that as well. But I think it's just a real interesting example of kind of a current sort of a state-of-the-art scientific question, is that we've seen this in a number of places. Just for example, when I was working for the Forest Service, we were working a lot on restoring meadows, and it was quite controversial, the role of what that restoration would do to the flows downstream. And I think, we learned a lot, the science advanced, but there's still a lot of questions. And so I view this as kind of really a great example to kind of look into that some more.
And both a question for both you and Laura. I'm kind of hogging the time here, but in terms of recharging the basin, what's kind of your thinking of surface water recharge? Is that something that we could manipulate somewhat for storing water?
I can answer that if that's okay. Well, we talked about this actually yesterday on the TAC meeting. There is not a need to recharge in the winter. The recharge process is really late summer, early fall. So we have to find a way to divert water when we have a lot of it, store it, and then let it trickle into the ground later in the summer. So I think finding a facility, siting a facility to do that will be challenging. But there seemed to be a lot of support for that on the technical advisory committee. And Barry, maybe you have some other ideas about unique ways to recharge water.
Well, one of the techniques that's being looked at pretty carefully in the Central Valley is basically overbank recharge, which is, that's a natural process, but because channels have been incising in a lot of areas in California, it doesn't happen as often as it used to. And plus, because people have got buildings and farms that are close to the stream banks, it's not necessarily socially acceptable to allow streams to flood the way they might have in the past. So that would be a possibility, would be to find places where there are areas along stream banks where it's possible to restore the channel and create more of an opportunity for overbank flooding, but still not have a lot of adverse impacts.
Any questions from board members for Laurel or Barry on this?
I have a question. This is Al. I guess I just need to understand a little better the relationship between this grant and our task of writing a GSP. As Laura went through this, it sounded like parts of the GSP would be developed after or over a 3-year period, while I thought our GSP had to be developed sooner. So if I could just understand a little better the relationship between what's going on with the grant and how our GSP is getting finalized.
Well, that's true. These grants just started and they do go for 3 years. So I can't tell you why they timed them like that. But the idea would be with many of these tasks to contribute the information or data gaps needed to get your initial plan out. But as I've learned from being involved in this, a lot of the things that will be in that initial plan will be not really detailed and not really developed. So you couldn't go from your GSP to applying for money to implement something. There's a bunch of steps in between that you have to do. And so the idea of developing these different, projects with all these people would be to fill that gap so that instead of having sort of a vague idea of we want to recharge water and this might be a good place, you might actually be able to identify a place where that could happen and then go forward with getting grants to build it. So it kind of assists with the plan, but then it kind of creates a bridge to the next steps of implementing a plan. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think what you're saying is that this isn't going to be that much of a building the plan that we have to submit, but in the implementation going forward of any things that would be suggested in that plan. So I think I understand better now. Thank you.
Other questions? I can't see everybody, so if you want to ask a question, you can just sort of pipe up. Any questions from the general public? Okay, well, bearing none, I guess we could move on to the next section. Thank you, Laurel and Barry,
thank
for your
you.
presentation, and looking forward to working with you. You've got a lot on your plate with this grant, and if you get through it all, it's going to be wonderful. All right, next item on our agenda is presentation and discussion regarding updates to GSP technical process. Laura?
Thank you, Glenn. This is Laura Foglia, Larry Walker Associates. And I think what we are planning to present for today really connects nicely to what Laurel just presented. We are moving forward with developing the plan, and we started with the TAC, a discussion about project and management actions. We did the required research to really see all the potentially ongoing plans and projects now down the road. That's kind of required in one of the GSP chapter, which is chapter 4. And then we have to go one step further and start discussing about possible projects that the GSA can implement down the road to demonstrate that the basin is sustainable. And you can go forward, Andrew, actually. Okay, so what the goal that we have is to design projects and management actions, and I like the idea of having them in 3 different categories. So the first one, maybe some projects, and I hope we can work with Laurel with that. Some projects might be a little bit more fleshed out. So we may have already for the GSP some detail presented, some ideas of possible locations, and this will be, and also some ideas about the monitoring that we want to go, that goes together with the project. Other projects might be kind of somewhere midway, so they can be a little bit more than just a concept, but not yet fully fleshed. And then I suggest to include also projects that can be, let's say, a little bit of a dream. Maybe they cannot be implemented in the next 5 years. They will take more time, or maybe they will never be implemented. But we want to have a big portfolio of projects to pick from, because we don't know exactly at the end in terms of water availability and actual impacts on the system. We don't know exactly what will happen in the next years. It's true that we have the model, and so we will try to use the model as much as possible to really design and understand what can be the impact of this project. So this is something that we will be doing. Andrew, if you can go to the previous one. I just want, okay, that one. I just we are categorizing the project that we have so far in terms of supply augmentation, demand management, and recharge and conjunctive use. And we did our best to start brainstorming ideas at the TAC. If you go next. The idea that we want to look at our priorities in how we are designing these project and management actions is really looking at how can we minimize the impact to the economy of the basin. So how exactly, like the idea that Laurel shared earlier, can we store water in the wintertime, or maybe recharge it up at the fringes of the basin so that it gets to the river later on in the season. We also want to maximize external funding, so look for projects and for grants that can pay for these projects. And if possible, we can also look at, we may have voluntary incentives approaches. And I can give you a quick example, and this kind of go back also to what was presented earlier. In other basins where the overdraft is real, so it's not Ukiah Basin clearly, they are suggesting something like if there is a general water conservation, if somebody is volunteering for conserving water and maybe use something like 10% less water, they may be kind of forgiven from the tax, from the extra tax that they are thinking about putting because of the cost of the GSAs. And this is just an example. And this 10% conservation, they were thinking about that for both municipal users and ag users. And somebody's thinking, okay, maybe I can save 10% just because I do something better in my distribution system. And again, we are talking about basins that really need to make up for a lot of missing, let's say, missing water. It's not really the case here, but still, we are missing water in some months, so we need to make up for that. Next. So we are looking at some at designing something that it's kind of the early years of the implementation phase, and then something that looks more ahead. So there is something that maybe we can look at in terms of demand management and conservation over the first 5 years of the GSP implementation. And as I said, one idea might be, can we explore options for conservation for both municipal and ag users? We discussed with the TAC the option of helping reducing evaporative losses. There is a lot of surface water that kind of gets lost just because of evaporation over the summer, and there were suggestions about how to kind of keep that a little bit contained. Is there something we can do for irrigation efficiency? Maybe yes, maybe not. And again, in case of really dry years of specific critical condition, somebody's thinking about pumping reduction in summers. Again, in an incentive-based program, and mostly a volunteering program. We can also think about supply augmentation, and there is a lot of discussion. I know that this is not going, I'm not sure if it's going to happen in the short time, but there is a lot of discussion in other valleys about small reservoirs, and I'm not sure we should call them reservoirs. They are more ponds or like offstream ponds, but next to the tributaries and not next to the main river. And then we want to assess and explore impacts on the system that will come from PVP and the FIRO projects. And finally, we have recharge and conjunctive use ideas in mind that really ties nicely with what Laurel was just discussing. So see if we can do something for finding new locations for recharge project, include thinking about stormwater recharge. Remember that this type of project, they have an extra appeal because they are multi-benefit projects. And whatever it's a multi-benefits project right now has even more chances of getting funding, because that's it's like the flood MARA idea that I don't know if you guys heard about, the idea of using excess water in the wintertime for recharging the aquifer, and that kind of helps with the flooding condition, and at the same time is helping with the recharging the aquifers. And if you go next, I think these are kind of more big picture. This is the ideas that we have for the following 15 years are still like concept ideas. These are not the ones that we're thinking about really fully fleshing out in the GSP. And then I added for you, just as an information, if you go next, Andrew. This is a summary of just a quick 4 items. So our PMAs may look at increased recharge, increased conservation, increased storage, and see what we can do to seasonally offset stream depletion. And I urge everybody, if you guys have any idea on what can be useful and want to discuss with us, we are really going through this exercise so far. And we will run with the model some simple scenarios that look at at all of them in kind of an hypothetical way, because so far we don't really have to, this is just the first phase of the plan. We don't need to start any implementation. So far we just need to get an idea of what might be more beneficial for our goal. And again, our goal is to keep groundwater levels at a certain stage in the summer months so that we are not impacting groundwater dependent ecosystem and surface water. And I added that in the next slide just for your consideration. The first round of implementation grants that were only for overdrafted basin has been released this week by Department of Water Resources. And again, Ukiah was not yet among the basin that could apply for this, but the same call will come out for the medium and high priority basin, I think in a year from now, I think next February, something like that. And there were 15 applications and they requested over 70 millions. 6 were awarded, but I think what it's interesting is that the awards went basically all completely to recharge projects. And so all the implementation projects that have been funded in this round are really for groundwater recharge. And also 4 out of the 6, let's say, winners were GSAs that are managing disadvantaged community basins. So I just want to point it out so that we make an extra effort, maybe thinking really in a creative way of taking advantage of what we are doing with the GSP, what Laurel will be doing with the coordination grant, and come up with a good idea of how recharge can really work out in this basin. And I think this is all what I have. Just I think this was the main component of the past month of updates on the GSP, really looking at what can we do next, what makes sense.
Okay, are there any questions for Laura from board members? So I have a question, Laura, and that's on the model kind of verification or testing, and how is that going to work? And have you already been doing it, and where do we stand, or I should say about validizing it?
So I think we finished the calibration, and with the data that we have from CastJam, things really seems to be looking very promising in terms of the model results. So we are pretty confident. And so we started trying to run the model looking at the future climate change and also looking at some of these scenarios, like we were trying to implement, for example, the purple pipe and recycled water project into the model, see what can be the impact. So the model will be used mostly as in a differential way. So we will have a baseline case scenario, and then we will look at the difference depending on the scenario that we will be running. So if we want to implement a certain recharge project, we can look at that. And basically the idea is that these difference in the scenarios in the results for both the stream leakage and the groundwater elevation will give us an idea of potentially which are the location that can be providing in the future the biggest impact in terms of what we want to reach. And so we were planning of having a quick update on the water budget, and then we decided that probably it makes more sense to present the water budget together with a couple of scenarios already, all packaged in one presentation for next time, so that then you really see how the water budget, because the basin is not in overdraft. I think you can always, we all see that. So it goes up and down, the storage, because of recharge in the wintertime, but it's really not overdraft. So it's more a question of understanding how we can create the impact that we are looking forward to using some specific scenarios, actions, ideas, and which are the locations that are more promising for that.
Any other questions from board members?
Laura, this is James. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, James, you go.
I just wanted to question, would I be able to see that PowerPoint presentation again? Would you be able to put it somewhere where I could see it? I just wanted to review it again for a point of reference, because I'm sure I'm going to want to refer back to it.
Oh, which PowerPoint?
Just talked about what you were just talking about. I kind of just want a reference to that.
The model.
Yeah, the model.
Okay. Yeah, we can actually. We are. I mean, the model has been presented in different pieces over time. Right. And our ideas was to kind of try to package everything together, because we also need to write an appendix that will just be about the model. So we can, but we can share with you all what we have presented in the past, okay, if that helps. And then still, there will be kind of a summary presentation.
Okay.
So,
Member White, do you
yeah,
have a
it's
question?
late. It's late, and I know we don't want to get into this too heavily, but at the TAC meeting, there was some talk about wells and the fact that some wells seem to go dry at some point. And then there was also kind of the idea that our GSA or GSP, however you want to look at it, that we are going to be responsible in some way for remediating or dealing with that. And I'm not sure if that's something that I misunderstood, and if it is, good, and if it isn't, do we really want to get into that?
So basically what we showed yesterday is that if things stay pretty much as they are right now, there is really no need for any specific funds, let's call it, for wells that are going dry, because it looks like there are no wells that are expected to go dry. And the idea of the specific funds is because you may heard in many other GSAs, they're really thinking about, okay, we believe that our economy is worth it, and we are okay about letting the groundwater go down another this many feet. We know that going down these many feet will create, will cause, I don't know, 10% of the domestic well to fail. And one way to present this type of approach to DWR has been, okay, it's kind of, it's a trading, right? We keep the economy, we have to replace and make wells deeper. And so the GSA can decide to have that kind of approach and decide that, okay, we don't think that going down 10 more feet or 20 more feet, we don't think it's an undesirable result, but it is an undesirable result for the domestic well, for example. So we will have a way to contribute towards replacing domestic wells. It's because the reason why we did it and the reason why we presented it yesterday is because DWR is really kind of picking holes in the existing GSPs that really didn't pay any attention to domestic wells. And, you know, a lot of domestic wells in the Central Valley are just going dry. And so there is what they call the human right to water. So you kind of need to show that you care about that components of your community. So it's a GSA decision also. It's not that we are just giving you options. And if we altogether decide, no, it's not needed because it's really not a real problem, as it is so far. But if we actually ran the numbers. If we go 20 feet lower, actually 15% of the wells will be dry. So that starts being a number. So yesterday we were talking about 2%, and there is the retirement age and everything. But if for some reason things go much lower, those are the numbers. And again, the model might not be perfect, but it gives us an idea, right? So what we are talking about. And again, I think it's kind of I call it sometimes an escamotage. It's just a kind of a trick. The GSA is saying it's not an undesirable result. I go lower, but I pay for the deeper wells, for deepening the well. Sorry. Does it answer?
That's a good answer. Thank you.
Welcome.
Other questions? Okay, if there's no other questions, then I guess we're done with this section, and thank you very much,
Actually,
Laura.
I think there is Devon with her hands up.
Devon, I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
Yep.
No, sorry, Laura. I was just Devin with the Farm Bureau. Just wanted a follow-up question from one of the previous presentations. Was that kind of an accurate number of what we are considering to be de minimis well users at this point in terms of those domestic numbers that were put on that monetary possible assessment chart? Is that an accurate representation within the basin at this point?
I think that's something that we found through databases and whatever. If we think it's not correct, I mean, all the information presented were taken from available information. So if it's if it's a number that doesn't sound right, we just have to go back and recheck it, or tell us where we can find a better number.
Yeah, I don't have anything to verify, just asking the question, because I think a lot of this connects back to, I think on the domestic well side, aside from our major districts, I mean, it's those de minimis well users that have always been sort of at the back of this conversation, simply because of the multitudinous numbers and maybe smaller PODs type of a situation. So some of these things kind of go together. It's hard to really assess what those impacts may be, if any.
Yeah, exactly. No, and I see your point. So what we found out is that it looks like the database that is available, and Rich, my colleague who presented yesterday, he kind of asked for some specific information that actually are not available for everybody. You need to ask and reach out for having all the database of domestic user and everything. It looks like it is pretty thorough, and it includes pretty much all the domestic wells. Sometimes we got comments like, I think my well is not in the database, but that's not true. It might be because the WCR, so the code and the location is not perfect. So this can happen, but it looks like at the end, most of the wells are really there. So we may want to go through it and take it with obviously we want to take this with a grain of salt, because it might not be perfect, but it might not be so far from reality, actually. Hopefully. Otherwise, it's kind of an amount of work getting all these data precisely that I'm not sure.
No, thank you for that.
Okay, any more questions before we move on from this item? I'm scrolling through to see if any hands are up. Okay, well, thank you, Laura. And now we'll move back to the agenda. Okay, so director reports. Are there any director reports? I will just add one. If you haven't heard, the U.S. Department of Agriculture has declared us under a drought emergency. So it'll be interesting to see how that affects the State Water Resources Control Board. But anyway, we meet USDA's definition, which actually is is relatively low threshold compared to what we expect, because droughts and the rest of the United States look different than here. I mean, in the Midwest, I think they think of something as being droughty if they have 3 weeks with no rain, but obviously in California, that's not the case. So our rainfall is probably around 45% of normal at this point. So, and we're kind of running out of time. So I'm almost certain that we're moving into a drought condition. That's the only thing I don't think it's any huge news to anybody here, but the move by USDA to declare us officially in a drought is significant.
Glenn, did they specify the region or all of Mendocino County?
They said Western United States. It's pretty broad. So.
Yeah, all 50 counties in California were part of that.
Oh, okay.
I can report to our flood control district had a special meeting, and we declared a stage 2 water alert, which is something that we apparently can do. And I think we can go up to a stage 4. I believe stage 4 is like when, hey, there's no more water. It was kind of grim. It doesn't, we don't know what's going to happen between now and the end of the summer, but there's a good chance that we could reach that stage 4. At this point, we're at stage 2.
Any other reports from board members? Okay, then we would go on to public comments on items not on the agenda. Are there anything? Oh, I'm sorry, Beth. I didn't see your hand. This screen.
No, I'm public. I'm the public.
Okay. All right. Go ahead, Beth.
Thank you, Glenn. Beth Salamone, General Manager of the Russian River Flood Control District. I'm also the chair of the Technical Advisory Committee for the GSA. I would like to follow up on Al White's comments about the Flood Control District's recent declaration. We are also co-hosts of a regional water resiliency task force, along with the Mendocino County Farm Bureau and the city of Ukiah. Participants include municipal supply members of the Upper Russian River Water Agency, many individual diverters, and Laurel, Marcus, and many other organizations are represented. The hope is to come together and share resources and information, and to better equip us all for whatever water resiliency issues are current. Right now, it is the drought. If you would like more information on that task force, if you would like to be added to the distribution list of a weekly water supply condition update that I send out on Fridays, or would like any other information, please do not hesitate to contact me, district manager at rrfc.net. Thank you.
So in a group of very active people, which are on this call, I really appreciate Beth's efforts to try to bring public awareness to the need to conserve in so many parts of my district, the first district, because we're facing kind of critical water issues outside of the city of Ukiah, which is sitting a little fat and sassy on this wonderful aquifer, but the rest of the county is kind of in dire straits, and we're really, really worried going into this water year. So conservation really is a rule, and I know that Ukiah is in good shape, and probably conservation might actually force them to raise rates. Who knows? But nonetheless, the rest of the county is I think kind of in a water emergency at this point. Other comments from the general public? Okay, well, if there's no further comments, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
You don't need a motion to adjourn. You can just adjourn the.
Okay, so when is our next meeting, Andrew?
Our next meeting will be the the second Thursday in April, which is the April 8th.
April 8th. And the next time?
I apologize. Yeah, April 8th.
Okay. So next time we'll be sure to have our agenda and support packet out in plenty of time for everyone to review, and we apologize for that and promise to do better. So thank you all for the meeting, and we'll see you next month.
A good one, everybody. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.